Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Wednesday, April the 9th, and delighted that you're with us and we have a chance to once again engage this awesome conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And I'm delighted to be here as co host with Jeanie, my awesome bride. And I'm going to just start out and just see if anyone has a comment, a question, somewhere they'd like to be going or looking at in terms of the work of forgiveness, and in particular, the power person dynamics we've been talking about. And I figured we'd laid a good enough foundation with doing the power person worksheet, or pardon me, doing the pseudo solutions, the non-being mind. I think we've got enough of a foundation that we can go into the 14 brains how to use that tool. So I'm going to plan to go into this is our longest worksheet by far, 14 pages, and it is an outgrowth of I believe it was the second online codependence interdependence intensive. The whole development of this particular tool, or 90% of the development of it, happened in that intensive. Which, by the way, if you're ready to take your work to the next level and this codependence information is making sense to you, we do have a self-study of the codependence intensive available, and it's actually two full online Zoom intensives that we did with quite a number of people, and we've converted those to video, and all of the teaching, all of the questions and answers, all of the processing. And this worksheet that we're going to talk about today, the Power Person Worksheet, for the first 25 or so years, probably a little more than that, that I taught the codependence work, it was a one-page worksheet. Then, out of one of these online intensives and all of the processing that happened, that one-page worksheet grew into 14 pages. And it's something that we had withheld from publishing because it's not something somebody can just pick up and go into any. And so, but I figured after laying this foundation with the pseudo solutions, that we had enough information to step forward and actually go into the process. So once I start, I'm going to just continue through this, and I don't know how long it's going to take. It might be finished today. It might take us 2 days. It might take us a week. I don't know. It might take us a month. We'll see what happens. And my request is going to be now, if there's any questions you have about what we've talked about or support you needed with anything, we'd ask you to put your hand up or put your question in the comment bar at this moment. And if we have no questions in either, hand up in the phone queue or the comments question, then I'm going to go into this Power Person worksheet, and I'm not going to be taking any questions except as they relate. I'm not going to go off into other topics. I'm going to ask you to keep any questions that you have on topic with what we're talking about with the power person dynamic. So if you have a thought, you have a question for us, the comment bar is there. Go ahead and place your question. Or if you have some support you need or a conversation you want to have about it, then push the call button and let's have a conversation. How can we support you? What's on your mind? If you're listening to us on a web page, the show is not going to be fully interactive. What you want to do, if you've gotten a notice and you went to the web page, what you want to do is open the app on your phone, find the Mind Shifters Radio link, and then when you click and listen through that link, you'll be able to fully interact, make comments, calling to the show or what have you. So anything that's on your mind, we're here to support you. So if you have a thought before we actually step into doing I'd like you to make that known with your comment or push the caller button. Otherwise, I'm going to jump right in and we're going to look at this codependence dynamic in the Power Person Worksheet. So one of the ideas of this worksheet is to become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from your actions. You've heard me say that many times. And so this is what we're looking to do with this worksheet is to really break down and the processes it goes through in order to produce our perception. Well, we actually don't have the Power Person Worksheet online yet. Jeannie, maybe if you wanted to go ahead and put that online. Dawn was just asking for that's a good thought. We actually just printed it off and put some of my latest notes in it. So if you want to go ahead, Jeannie, and maybe you could just put in the notes. And I don't know, I know you're holding the baby, so that might not work right now, but we'll get it online and make sure that there's a link in the show notes for it. So the objective, one of the objectives is to realize that we are not our minds, we are not our thoughts, but that we are the beings behind the mind, behind the thoughts. And as you are able to step back from your mind, you realize that you have the ability to source information without reference to what we call the mind. And that's when the being that we are, the true human being, begins to wake up. And so we're looking to tap you as a being on the shoulder and have you recognize that you are not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your body, you're not the self that your mind pretends that you are, a self made up of, pictures from the past, experiences from the past, etc., but that you are a created human being. And as you take charge of your own mind, then your mind becomes, or what people call the mind, becomes an instrument for expression rather than the source of your experience. You hear Yeshua saying, I am in this world, but not of it. So here I am functioning through the world that my mind presents to me, but I'm not going to allow it to source anything for me. And if it resonates something in my carbon-based memory that is not in alignment with who I am and how I choose to create my life, then I'm going to do the work of removing those influences that never belonged. So you start out with the worksheet in step 1. You name yourself the same way as you do in the reality management worksheet and get really clear who you are. So you name yourself, I who am love. When experiencing elevated levels of stress, have been tricked into believing that the perceptual constructs of my mind, my realities, are true. So first thought to recognize, if we go to the opening words in the book of John, the opening words in the book of John do not say what we've been told they said. They don't say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh. They say in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. The mind energy you engage in is stored holographically in every cell in your structure. And once that process begins to happen and information is stored within the body, within what we call the body, the energy system, then that energy system begins to create constructs out of the data stored there. And the mind has this really amazingly powerful ability to literally turn thoughts into pictures. So not only does mind energy literally become the chemistry within our structure, what they're showing in the laboratory is when you think a thought, that thought becomes in your structure a neuropeptide. Something that a moment ago was absolutely non-physical is now measurable with our instruments, so we call it physical. We're not proclaiming that it is physical, but that's what we call it. and it appears in form. And what they found is that mind energy, when it appears in form, which we call a neuropeptide, circulates around in the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. It lands on the receptor site, and some of the people studying this are saying that the cell then replicates the neuropeptide. That's not my take. I think what's actually happening is that when the neuropeptide lands on the cell, the neuropeptide incorporates the neuropeptide, literally the thought, inserts itself in the cell. And if we were to be inside the cell watching that insertion take place, we would see that mind energy becoming flesh. We'd see that, and it would literally appear to be what we call chemistry. It would be in the frequency range of what we call chemistry. And then when those energies are called up in the future, the mind structures a picture out of it, and we believe that something that was stored in the mind from the past that produces pictures in our minds and paints those pictures on the inside of our eyeballs is actually the present moment. Therefore, we believe they're true. And most people live in a world of perceptual constructs that are metaphorically, but almost literally painted on the inside of their eyeballs. They think they're looking out through their eyes at the world when what they're looking at is their own unique perceptual construction of what's going on in the actuality. And since they're all from the past, obviously they're not true. They're an approximation, they're a way to give us information, but there's nothing true about them in the present moment. And if we allow those constructs of the mind to be substituted for the faculties we have with which we are be able to be aware of what's going on in the actuality, to gather information directly from the actuality, if we do that, then we've given up a just a super important faculty, the ability to be directly in touch with the actuality, be instructed, be informed by it, rather than being informed from information in the past that's resonated within the mind. So these constructs in the mind are just reflections and projections of the content of my own carbon-based memory. Now, sometimes that content is content that I'm aware of, and sometimes the reflections of that content are unconscious because I've dissociated from that particular information that's been stored in my carbon-based memory system. Now, when I talk about carbon-based memory, if you were to take your body into the lab and say, here, take a chunk of this and tell me what it's made of. What are the base elements of this tissue structure that I call my body? What the lab tech would come back and tell you is that your so-called body has as its base element carbon. So we have this carbon-based device that stores information. You'll often hear me refer to carbon-based memory. The memory is literally stored in carbon atoms. It might click something for you when you realize that there are 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons in a carbon atom. And you might recognize that number 666. What is that? They're structures in the mind from the past that are stored in this carbon-based device. They are things that, since they're from the past and therefore not true, will tend to conflict with what's true. We have a mind that has the ability to actually be in the present and experience what's actually going on in the actuality. That mind in the ancient teachings was called the mind of Christ. Now, if we had a mind that went against what we called the mind of Christ, what would that mind be called? Obviously, it would be the Antichrist. And what we're looking to do, and as we become more conscious and aware, you recognize that if there's something stored in carbon-based memory, that goes against the truth, then my work is to uncover, recognize, and remove that which is not based in truth. And the tool of removal that we've developed in this work comes from the first century Aramaic language, and it's called forgiveness. So if I have thought disorders, if I have thoughts that are out of harmony with the truth of who I am, then I want to apply a tool of removal to those thought disorders. That process is called forgiveness. Carbon-based memory has turned that process into pardoning, letting everybody else off the hook for what's happening inside of one's own mind, inside of one's own structure. Now, the way one tells that there are energetic patterns that need to be forgiven that don't belong within the structure is that there's a signal that comes with engaging in an energy that doesn't belong in your structure. And the signal is pain. Now, pain has this absolutely beautiful, wonderful purpose. Its purpose is to make your ears grow, to get you to listen, to get you to hear beyond what carbon-based memory is feeding you. So pain is a signal that there's an energy here that doesn't belong here. And that signal, because it is what I call my body that stores information, that signal stored somewhere in my body is going to create a disturbance or a dis-ease condition. When fear or hostility are active in me, my mind is using corrupt data. Fear and hostility are not a signal that somebody out there has a problem. Fear and hostility are a signal that there's something moving inside of me and that the data behind it is corrupt. And most often, to the point where my offering is, this is a dynamic that literally runs the whole world. I'm talking about every business, every government, every church, every family, every community. Virtually every mind on the planet is playing out what we're going to identify as a power person dynamic. And those dynamics, when called into play by a goal that we hold, cause my mind to construct a world, a picture that I think I see outside of me, but is really a product of an energy that is moving inside of me and therefore is obviously mine, stored in carbon-based memory. Now, until the hidden dynamics, what tends to happen, we live in a culture of blame, and most of us were reared, and by the age of 4, we're very committed members of the one world universal religion of blame. And if something was moving inside of us that was painful, what the culture told us to do was to find somebody to blame, somebody to point the finger at, somebody to make the guilty party, somebody else who will be at fault. You'll notice that our main worksheet, the forgiveness process, is a no-fault process. We're not looking to establish fault. We're just looking to establish responsibility for the qualities of energy that are moving and to apply forgiveness to remove the ones that never belonged. So until these power person dynamics are uncovered and healed, one will live in their own self-generated, why is this happening to me again experience. The fact is you're a creator. Life will relentlessly cooperate with your creations, conscious or unconscious. And the more time you've spent in denial, the more your creative process will be unconscious. When one creates something unconsciously, and it comes along and bites them in the butt, they have somebody to blame. They talk about their whole conversation is about somebody else and how they did it to them, especially in the situations that would match the title of my book, the Why Is This Happening to Me Again situation. The one where it happened when you were 3, it happened when you were 5, it happened when you were 7, 9, 10, 14, 17, 22, 84. Still going on. Why? Because there's something in you that is unconscious, and everything that is in us, by definition of is energy, and of course, energy is motion, and everything that moves creates an energy wave. Literally, to remember a thought, brain cells have to fire in me, electrons have to move. There has to be an energetic motion, and that motion creates waves. And those waves communicate to all the world what we expect. So life will always cooperate with you. And I'd take it even a step further that there is a grand conspiracy going on. It is so huge, it's beyond comprehension. And the conspiracy that life is cooperating with is to show you everything that you hold that is of a diseased nature, whether you sourced it or somebody in your bloodline yesterday, last week, last month, last year, or 5,000 years ago sourced it. Life's purpose is to show it to you and give you the opportunity to apply forgiveness and remove it. Most people, when those energetic patterns move, when those things happen, want to blame life rather than stop and go, why is it that I'm feeling, put a word in there, I don't care. Why is it that I'm feeling rage? Well, because that happened. No, no, you're feeling rage because there's rage in you. How often you've been through that kind of rage? Over and over and over and over again. Why? Because it's in you. But if you use those energetic patterns to paint pictures of different people on the inside of your eyeballs, then you'll think that the world is out to get you, because as long as you hold something painful, life is always going to resonate to the pained part of your experience. Now, people say, well, why would life do that? Why would life want to hurt me like that? No, life has no desire to hurt you whatsoever. Life's desire is to heal you. But as long as you're in denial and dissociated from something that's destroying your tissue structure, then life is going to tune into the lowest energy that you hold, and resonance is going to draw someone to you that's going to show that to you. The purpose of life is not to hurt you with that. The purpose of life is to show you what you are hurting yourself with. And as you recognize that and wake up, the world isn't out to get you. The world is in a conspiracy to heal you. My offering is that life abhors our disease conditions. Life wants us to live. And if my internal reality structure is built on some hidden pain-based associated content, then life is going to resonate with that, present an experience that's going to fire those brain cells. And if I stop and remember that pained perceptions only come from pained content, then I realize not that life is inflicting pain on me, but that I'm holding something that is causing my pain. And this is my opportunity to learn forgiveness. And you will notice that life is relentless. But what happens is If there's someone out there that I have a goal for, let's say this particular situation that's resonating pain for me, and I have a goal for someone out there, and I'm building a picture out of my pain of them, then my projected pain showing up in my mind as something about them has me believe the lie that they're the cause of my pain. I mean, I literally, if I have something I've dissociated from and someone comes along and does a behavior that resonated what I've dissociated from, I'll use that dissociated content to produce my brain's image of them. If I'm in pain with any particular picture that shows up in my mind, I'm in pain not because of the picture that shows up in my mind, not because of the person who triggered that picture, but because in me there is an energy that doesn't belong. That energy in the ancient Aramaic language was called sin. And that word in Aramaic has nothing to do with the Greek monstrosity that gets pushed down people's throats in their fear-based theologies about sin. The word is simply an archery term. If I went into the archery range and I fired at the target and I missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin, i.e., you're off the mark. You're engaging in energy that doesn't belong. The reason I feel something moving in me is because there's something moving in me. And the reason it's moving in me is because it's in me in the first place. And if life keeps coming along and moving that in you and moving that in you, and you have conversation after conversation about this person or that person or the same person 10 times over about how they're the problem in your life, then you're living in denial, you're dissociated from your own content, and you don't realize that all life is trying to do is bring you back to life, to show you what you're using, what you're holding that does not belong in you. And literally, when you forgive, when you remove a pain dynamic from your mind, it's almost like all of life stands up, shifts 15 degrees, sets itself back down, and now there's a whole new dynamic going on. But until you change that dynamic in you, life cannot shift because life's purpose is to show you what you're holding on to. If my mind is producing pain and I'm projecting that content into my mind's image of somebody else, of them, and if I believe that lie, I cannot access the hidden underlying corrupt data that needs to be removed, the content that I need to forgive in order to be free. And that's where this genius piece of information comes in from Yeshua, that he shows how to collapse those false pictures and get access to the deeper hidden parts of your own mind. So I'm the one who ultimately must learn to discern and remove or forgive what is at the root of these internally generated pain-based pictures that appear to be true about everybody else, but really are only true about me. And if I want to be liberated from the why is this happening to me again from that past, then I'm going to need to go inside myself and clean it up. Now, as I develop the skill of owning, decoding, and forgiving, that is removing my own unconscious content, I make a space for, instead of playing out the same old pictures, for actuality to come in and show me what the truth is. What most people do is they have zero or next to zero contact with the actuality of the moment, and they live in these pictures in their minds, and they believe because their mind is showing them pictures that it must be true. And they displace actuality with reality. Now, we're defining here reality is the output of the mind. I'll remind us again of the Harvard research, goes back into the 50s. It's the most quoted research in psychological history. Nobody's ever proven or even come close to showing that this data is in error. But what they showed is that in a time frame where they could measure the firing of 10,000 brain cells, it was all of that electrical activity happening in the brain, that in that same time frame, which was about a 25th of a second, the max amount of data that went into conscious awareness was 9 bits of data. And most people habitually displace actuality, what's actually happening in the actual world, with pictures generated by their minds based upon their goals. So, to relinquish this habit of displacing actuality with the power person pattern of dissociated pain based realities, I get to displace, I get to remove that which presents itself as the truth of the moment, the content of my own mind, and make the space for the experience of what's actually going on in the world. So that's kind of a foundation piece of understanding of where we need to go if we're going to work through the power person dynamics. So, what do I need to understand in order to carry out the work that I need to do? Well, to recognize that when I set a goal, a stress is established in my mind. This single piece of information is such a life changing piece of information compared to what the whole world is doing. Yes, there are lots of people out there that can tell you how to reduce your stress. Show me somebody who knows how to cause stress. And we actually do a workshop called Getting the Stress You Need. Without stress, you would be dead. It is an absolute necessity. Well, why don't I know how it's created? Because most of the world is working within the content of their own dissociated minds and therefore have little to no contact with truth. And making changes in the mind rather than shifting from perceptual constructs into actuality means that I'm basically rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. When I set a goal, I create a stress. Now, the level of stress created is determined by the distance, so to speak, the differential between the way I see it, what my perception is, and the way I want it to be. So I see the world a certain way. Gee, there's a ball laying over there on the desk on the left, and I want it to be on the right side of the desk. Well, I can lay here and want it to be or intend for it to be on the right side of the desk for all of eternity, but that's not going to move a muscle. And laying here looking at it and saying, oh, I want the ball to be moved over there is not going to move a muscle or a brain cell. But the minute that I take that intention or that thought and turn it into a goal, I want to move the ball from this side of the table to the other side of the table. Now, the functioning purpose of my mind is to show me, with the best data that it's got, how to accomplish that. So my mind is going to say, so we're going to put down the phone, we're going to get up, we're going to walk to the other side of the room, we're going to pick up the ball, and I'm going to use my left hand to pick the ball up, and I'm going to move it over to precisely this location. Now my mind is responding constructively to stress. It's the way it's supposed to be. Anything that you want to achieve in the world, you achieve because you created a stress that moves you toward its achievement. But if you load a goal in your mind that brings some form of hostility or fear into play from your own unconscious dynamics, then the behavior that your mind is trying to feed to you to direct producing the result that you want will be distorted. And it will seem like there's just no way to achieve what I want to achieve, because everything that moves in the mind that's based in hostility or fear distorts the ability of the mind to accurately show us how to produce a result. So the distance between, the ball laying on the table, I want it here, over there, it's like, no big deal. Not much stress in that. But cancel the thought, what if laying on the table was a ticking time bomb that was ready to go off in 20 seconds? And I set the goal for it to be out on the street rather than on the table across the room from me. Hmm, different level of motivation, different distance between the way I see it. Oh, the ball's on the left, I want it on the right. I want it to be on the right, but no big deal. So there's not much motivation there. But the minute I realize that's a ticking time bomb and I want it out on the street so that I'm safe, my mind is going to go to work, and there's going to be a very distinct increase in the level of my stress and the motivation to carry out the behavior that I'm guided to carry out. Now, when someone violates a goal that I hold, the distance between the way I want it to be and the way I see it expands. And with that expansion, my stress is elevated. If that increase in stress resonates or calls into play hidden, painful, emotionally dissociated parts of my mind, and my mind includes my whole genetic history, then I will tend to use that content to build the pictures painted on the inside of my eyeballs. And when I do that, I'll take my internally stored data, corrupt data, and I make pictures of someone else out of it. So someone else shows up in my mind with my pain attached. And that at that point, I'll start to believe that the pain is their problem, caused by them. Once again, we've developed it's a really complicated and challenging test to apply, but it is absolutely 1000% true and on track. How do I tell whether something I'm feeling is mine or not? I mean, how do I tell? Well, the test is a challenge, but everybody can do it. How do I tell? I'm feeling it. That's all I need to know. Now, when I tell somebody the lie, you made me feel, what did I just do? I just dissociated from my own content. I just told my mind to hide that from me. The minute I tell somebody else that they're responsible for what's moving in me, I've just hidden on a whole other level what it is in me that I need to resolve. Because remember, pain is a signal that I'm holding on to an energy that does not belong within my structure. Now, if I'm unconscious of this transparent process of projection, I will see the outpicturing of my mind's hidden content, my perception, as an absolute fact. Look, you are the one who made me feel this way. And, people who've never been acquainted with the way the mind works have not a clue that the constructs of their mind can show them false pictures, can show them lies. Oh, no, it's always true. It's always their fault. It always has been all my life. So if I'm in denial and dissociated from the outpicturing of my own mind's hidden content, then my perception I'm going to believe is true. And the objective here with this worksheet is to go into deeper and deeper and deeper levels of unraveling the dissociated content in my mind, right down to the point where I touch into my genetics, into my genes, and start to clean the data up there. Now, of course, when I project, when I'm sure that that I'm feeling, and obviously I'm feeling it, it's got to be mine, but I use that data to project into my brain's image of someone else, my mind will show me that they're the ones who are behind what's happening in my own mind. So the bottom line truth is that my projections, the pictures I think I see out there, since I'm the one feeling it, is detailing a hidden part of my own mind. A part of my own mind is being projected. Now, just because I'm projecting a part of my mind on someone else doesn't mean it isn't true about them. It is possible, even though I'm projecting that it's true about them, but strictly speaking, I cannot tell by the picture my mind is showing me. But here's what I do know 1000% of the time, and that is that it's true about me. Since it comes from my mind, it's always true about me. And what people do when they're in denial and dissociated from the content of their own minds is they're always in conversation about them and what they did to them, rather than in conversation with themselves about what am I going to do to remove this discomfort from my physiology. So the presence of my fear and or hostility testifies to the truth that my mind is using corrupt data to build the world of my perception, the world that all of us inhabit. So when I'm lost in these unconscious dynamics, I'm simultaneously tricked into believing that my mind's lies are true, and I'm blocked about seeing the truth about myself. I'm blocked about seeing that information accurately. The objective of this worksheet is to see all information accurately. If hostility or fear is moving in my mind, because there is a gateway in the mind that brings love into the structure, that gateway is closed. And the gateway that in Aramaic was called Rachma is shut down when hostility or fear is active. And when that happens, the experience of the actuality of the moment, the truth of the moment, is gated out of my awareness. It was an interesting piece of research that they did with mice. And they put a piece of cheese, whatever food that the mouse would go after, in front of it. And well, actually, before they did that, what they did is they wired the brains of the mice to electrodes into the area of the brain where sound is heard. And they had a clicking device that they would click in the mouse's ear. And when they clicked this device in the mouse's ear, the area of the brain that sound is registered would register, and they'd have it hooked up to an oscilloscope, and you'd see every time the device went click, there'd be this firing in that part of the brain. And you'd see the activity of sound being perceived by the mouse. Actually, it might have been rats. Then they put the mouse in a bell jar. They're still hooked up to electrodes. They're clicking this device in its ear, and they put a mouse in front of, or pardon me, they put a piece of cheese in front of the mouse, except in years since I've read this research. I may have this, you know, a little bit mixed up. I think it was actually cats in the brain, and they put a mouse in front of the cat. And the minute that they put a mouse in front of the cat, they could click that clicker till the cows came home, and there would be no sound registered. The sound was totally and completely gated out of the mind. When we're in hostility or fear, active present love is gated out of the mind. It's blocked. So actuality can be just blocked out of the mind, and we end up living in these reality structures. When one repeats the pattern of blame at the root of their own pain, it voids the ability for healing in regard to that issue because the information denied is gated out of awareness. It's blocked from awareness. So, in this Power Person worksheet, the objective here is to identify precisely the person who's triggering me and then the goal that's driving the process. These become the key way to healing. So on the worksheet, in this particular worksheet, as I'm doing the codependence worksheet or the Power Person worksheet, I'm going to look at who is the object of my attention? Who am I focused on here? Now, since this is the Power Person worksheet, oftentimes the person who will be named here will be the power person because they're the one you're interacting with. But oftentimes, your power person maybe has been gone from your life for decades. But if this person is resonating a power person dynamic, then I want to identify who that is. And so there's a blank in this step of the worksheet. So the object of my attention is blank. And then I want to look at the goal that's driving that whole process. What I want, the exact goal I hold for this person, for this object of attention. And this could be any person, place, thing, or event, past, present, or future, including myself. I can do this worksheet. We're doing a worksheet on the power person dynamic in the mind. It's not on the person. So it could just be a situation that's bringing this up. So I want to, as I do in the forgiveness worksheet process, I want to identify the goal that I hold for this person that is resonating this power person dynamic in me. Now, once you've gone that far in the start, and again, we'll post it's a 14-page worksheet. Looking at the time, we're probably going to spend, several days on this. And as I say, I'm going to, unless your questions are about the worksheet as we're going through it, I'm going to just stay with the worksheet process. And if you have a question, certainly, put it in the comments. So once I've identified the situation or the person involved and the goal that I hold, this is the time where I want to start doing forgiveness work. I mean, immediately, I'm going to finish this whole 14-page worksheet, which really just digs down into the deepest parts of the mind, literally digs down into the genes. But at the same time, I'm going to pick up and complete the forgiveness process using this same object of attention and this same goal. Now, we head to step 3, and you want to recognize that there are 2 different types of power person dynamics. The first is an active power person. That involves messages you accepted from an individual that you perceive to be as some sort of an authority or someone who had more control over your life than you did in any given situation. So this person actually said these words to me, or I went through this experience with this person. So that's an active power person message. That usually involves a parent, although not always. The original conditions that set up the acceptance of this dynamic in the mind was, so now you're going to get detailed. He, she, they, whoever the person is, and what they did. So what were the conditions? I want to start to identify. So in order for a power person dynamic to be installed in a child's mind, and again, it's usually between a child and a parent, although not absolute and not necessarily. I've worked with people. I remember one fellow who he was in his 70s and he was in a store when the store was robbed, and the guy pointed a gun at him, threatened to kill him. And he recognized when he did the codependence workshop, oh my God, that's my power person dynamic. That's what's going on for me. And that had happened to him when he was in his 70s. But most people, it's an early childhood experience. So what are the conditions that bring about this power person dynamic? One, the power person was not functioning as love. They were not engaging in just and fair behavior toward me. Second, they had more power over my life than I did. If those two conditions happen, and then this third condition is met, then as when you think of this body mind unit as an energy system, as an energy field, if this third factor is added, then the energy field opens and literally becomes energetically just an energetic sponge, just literally sucking in all of the information energetically that's going on in the environment. Whether the information, whether the energy is spoken or not, whether it's expressed or not, doesn't matter. The energy will be taken in by the individual. So the third factor that turns a situation into a power person dynamic is, or instills the power person dynamic in an individual, is that they perceive the event as a survival situation. So when those three things occur, this person is not functioning as love. They got more power over my life than I do, and they're not functioning. And I perceive this circumstance where they're not functioning as love as a survival situation. Now, survival does not necessarily mean physical survival. The survival, the threat perceived could be a threat of psychological annihilation, could be the threat of financial ruin. It could be an emotional destruction that's happening. Or it could be literally that one is afraid for one's life, a physical survival. So when those three conditions are met, the person who's going to end up being the power person was not functioning as love, or not engaging in just and fair behavior. They had the power and I didn't. And third, I perceive the event as survival. And it can be in any one of those four realms: psychological, financial, emotional, physical. If I perceive it as something that could destroy me, then energetically, that's when this power person dynamic becomes instilled in the mind. And most people do not have just one power person. Most people will have different power persons in different arenas in their lives. Or they may have one power person, but there may be different behaviors involved by the power person in different arenas. For instance, one might have a power person in the arena of money and a different power person in the arena of relationships, a different power person dynamic in the arena of taking care of oneself. And So we generally, people have more than one power person in their lives, can be several. The way that you tell in any given situation who your power person was is when you are ultra stressed, whose behavior do you do? Once a power person dynamic is instilled in the mind, for the rest of that person's life until they become cognizant of, address, and forgive the power person dynamic, when it's called into play, it will literally run that person's life. And as a result of that dynamic being installed in the mind, there will only be three behaviors possible for that individual. And the behavior that what we call the automatic decision system in the mind will call into play will be dependent on the level of stress they're under. When there's little or no stress, one will tend to do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they'll move out of that dynamic and they'll go into doing the automatic decision kicks in and demands that they do it, will kick into doing whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. And then when they become ultra stressed, they'll do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. And that behavior belongs to the power person will tend to be totally and completely unconscious. Most people will detest themselves for it and say, once they discover themselves doing that, I'm never going to do that again. And they're absolutely sincere and they mean they will never do it again. And they won't until they're under that ultra stressed condition again. And then they'll do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. That's how behavior is driven by the power person dynamic. And we're at 2 o'clock, so we've got to start on this Power Person Worksheet. We'll continue it tomorrow. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. And Sally, I'm glad it's explaining things. And I hope that it gives you the ability to free yourself from the stress generated by what's going on in the world and in the country right now, so that you can give what this world needs more than anything right now. I mean, it's an old byline from a very popular song. Is what is those who can hold to the active presence of love. Yes, they sang it to us. What the world needs now. Yeah, but not in the mushy sense of the incorrect definition of the word love, but literally what the world needs now is for people who are free of the power person dynamic, are free of hostility or fear, and can simply literally bring their human lives, the active presence of love, that healing presence, to bear upon the circumstances and the situations in the world. Yeshua spoke about a principle in physics when he said a little leavening leavens a whole loaf. He wasn't talking about bread. He was talking critical mass in physics. If enough of us can show up as conscious, active, present love, then those who are pained, those who are driven by their power person dynamic, will be safe enough to open the dissociated part of their own minds and allow the healing presence of love, the literal physiological healing presence of love in to produce healing. Yeah, it's what the world needs. And I'm glad that's clicking for you. That's awesome. Blessings. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. The best year yet of your eternal life. We'll continue this tomorrow.